Hello, and welcome to a Wizardly Weekly review of some of the DM's Guild content. Today we are reviewing A Night of Masks and Monsters by Ashley Warren. Now, before we dive into the review, let's tell you about the criteria we will be using for our reviews. Eric?
We both understand the subjective nature that plagues review culture online, and we want to tell you that we're not going to fall into those traps of just spewing our opinions. Hence the objective criteria we've chosen to review all the content on this channel.
We've developed a 10-star rating for our reviews that will account for all criteria. The lore of the content, the difficulty in implementing the one-shots, the classes, etc. And from there, we go to the balance and then to the draw and finally capping off with our personal opinions, which, like we said, won't affect the rating.
100%. So without further ado, we're going to jump into our first topic, which is lore. So, going into our lore section, we're talking about worldly status and lore pertaining to persons, places, or things. So my first question for you, James, is there lore present in this work?
Absolutely. Yes, of course there is. And within the first few pages of the book, the summary for the lore is very well laid out, and it fleshes out the whole scenario very well. Honestly, it's great.
I couldn't agree more with you, James. The first 5 pages, an excellent summary about the one-shot itself, and how to incorporate it into an existing campaign if needed. So, beyond that, would you say that the lore is intriguing?
Yes, you know what? I've always loved the thought of a larger overarching plot to my campaigns, whether it's as a player or a DM, and this one-shot does introduce this sort of an arc, and it does so in a very, very strong way.
Gotcha. No, I completely agree. It truly does. And it does this with like the lore that's surrounding the Aurum and the Malum Animus. More on that in the full-length review. But I do truly love the themes that the lore of Ebrito brings to the table for DMs and players alike. It's classy, it's sassy, and it's masqueradey intriguey. So my next question for you as well, James. Does the lore enhance the work? If so, how? And if not, why?
I'd say so. I'd say it does. I think the lore, the location, and the general feel in the setting works very well within itself.
Yeah, absolutely. I believe this adventure, its location, its characters, they're all a wonderful contribution to the world of Faerun, or any homebrew setting that you have.
Absolutely. And although this section seems kind of short right now, we're just going to give you our star rating on the lore section, and this one earned a 10 out of 10 for the lore section for Night of Masks and Monsters.
Truly amazing. Okay. Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
Yeah. So, James, talking about the lore in depth, this is the full review. What are your thoughts?
Thoughts on a general note, like you mentioned already, the Aurum and the Malum Animus really give that nice, grandiose feeling, but it's not overpowering.
100%.
And that will kind of touch back to our balance stuff that we talk about later. However, lore altogether, the descriptions of the locale, I know you've mentioned it about Venice and how it's very, very idyllic in that sense, and it's just a beautiful setting. And the beautiful thing is it's not extremely lore heavy in certain areas to allow that flexibility of implementation, which again will come up in one of our next sections.
110%. The only thing that I'd like to add just on the full in-depth about the lore is, again, just off of what you touched on, the Malum Animus and the Aurum, fantastic use of something that's so core to D&D, which is the cosmic battle between good and evil. It's a thing, especially like, you know, heaven versus hell, and, you know, the devas versus the devils. I thought that was very intriguing. Definitely got, you know, and it's subsurface until near the end. So I really enjoyed that. And the main thing for me is just the use of actual Italian in the work itself.
Yes.
Ashley, I'm sure you were informed when you were crafting it, and it's just so well crafted for people who understand Italian or those who don't, and you just like Google search it afterwards to find those nuggets that just blow your mind. fantastic. Like, for example, the place itself, like hybrido means hybrid. On top of that, then you've also got prospero, who then is found out to be acro, but prospero means wealthy, and he's also the marquis, so it all kind of makes sense. As well as Castel de Maschara, which means Castle of Masks. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing all of this. Italian is not a language I know. And then past that, you also have Tropovino, Piccolo Tropovino, which is absolutely hilarious because he is the little gnome who essentially knocks your party around and kickstarts the whole conflict. That is to ensue. So Piccolo literally means small, and Tropovino means too much wine, and he was a drunk gnome. So it kind of is all a nice little shout out there. And yes, hybrido and the theme of hybridization in this is heavy, and it should be because the main villain, I should say, Acro, is a Cambion, which is a mix between a devil and a human. You also have the hybrid creatures. I'm gonna let you talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so honestly, yeah, you hit all the major points, and I know I left that up to you for a reason. I can't speak Italian, and I don't want to try and butcher anything, and I think you did a great job. But what you were saying there at the end there about it being about hybrids and things like that. So again, you're in the in-depth. There's going to be huge spoilers coming in the next few seconds, coming straight out of my mouth. So turn away. 3, 2, 1. Plenty of time. Okay, if you're not gone by now, here it is. So what Prospero, aka Acro, is doing is he is taking people that come to his parties, putting these masks on them, which then turn them into hybrids. So bears, wolves, foxes, tigers, lions, everything. And he's trying to create an army to help fight against the Devas.
Yep.
And one of the main characters, Kara, that comes in is meant to, get the players to go on this journey to investigate this. And that's kind of a part of the draw in to loop the characters into this adventure, is to kind of have them be given that, missive, like, hey, come here, do this. Or, like what Ashley did in the very, very beginning, which I thought was super strong, was give a possible introduction to this one-shot, which was, it's a reward. And, a lot of this that we're talking about is really, really just well laid out in the first few pages of the book.
It's so rich, honestly. The first 5 pages, that's what really hooks you, just gets you immersed. It's incredible.
Absolutely.
Honestly. Yeah.
And you know what? I think that tops it for me for this.
Okay, yeah, the only other note that I had for lore, which does, like you mentioned, it goes in more about difficulty of implementation and balance, is that the lore is so good and so rich that it does potentially put a DM in a hot seat and in a hot spot.
That's true. Okay, I'm going to pick that one up real quick. So essentially, a place so wonderful and vibrant as you've created, Ashley, which, once again, thank you. The only Achilles heel with that is that it's so rich and so vibrant, players are going to want to come back.
Yeah.
There needs to be a little bit more to it.
Yeah, or like you're going to say later on, it really makes players want to get off the rails.
Exactly.
And go exploring.
Exactly.
Yeah. So we will get to that in a moment. But yeah, for us, I believe that is totally everything that we had to talk about on the lore section. Once again, Ashley, fantastic job.
Wonderful. Creating
such a vibrant and just steeped location and your descriptions for it.
Absolutely.
I know James has been talking about that forever in terms of like the buildings, the stained glass, the lighting, even how you described. So fantastic. This is why it got the 10 out of 10 stars for us.
So go check it out and stay tuned for our next section, difficulty. And we'll see you there.
All right, so on to our next section, difficulty. How hard is it to implement and understand? So James, are there quick reference guides present in the work? Maps, charts, etc.?
Absolutely, you bet. There are a good handful of tables and charts. All are very easy to follow. My only gripe is bouncing between pages for information, but that's more of a personal issue. But yeah, that's it for me.
Honestly, like you nailed it, James. I don't have anything else to say on this one.
Okay, well, I'll ask you this one then. How difficult is it for the DM to implement?
Well, I think in my opinion, there's definitely going to be some difficulty for a DM to implement the proper level of intrigue that's worthy of the rich lore that
Okay.
is established for the setting of a burrito. I'm going to elaborate on this more in the full-length review, but James, you had the hands-on experience, so I'm going to let you talk about that.
Okay, honestly, I didn't find that many personal gripes with it, but that could just be me and my style of DMing. However, the implementation in a general sense was easy, it flowed, and you know what, we'll go more into that in our full-length review, but this otherwise gets a thumbs up from me.
Solid.
So, the next question we have is, how difficult is it for you, the player, to implement?
Well, having been on the player side of the table, I have to say that it was little to no difficulty for me to comprehend the lore, the story, the characters, and to just really immerse myself into it. With the tangible assets such as the maps, the charts, a drinking game, it was a rebel-rousing experience that had me pilfering cheese from the fridge and gulping wine. James?
You know what? Honestly, I couldn't agree more. It was a wonderful night. It was great as a DM. I mean, I didn't get to be as a player, but at the end of the day, it was amazing.
Yeah, 110%. So then my last question for you is, what's the payoff for the difficulty then?
Okay, so from the perspective of a DM, if the players are running through this as a one-shot, the in-game payoff is minimal. But I mean, that's always something a DM can be flexible with a loot treasure book or a loot table of some kind. But where this campaign's true payoff lies is around the table or over Skype, wherever it is. It's a riot to play, and I personally highly recommend this.
I completely understand what you're saying and I agree with your perspective. I would just like to add on top of that that the amount of time it took you to prepare as a DM and us to prepare as players to create our characters and the investment of our time, I think it's well worth the payoff. 2 to 4 hours of your time for the impact, the memories, the laughs. It's a huge bang for your buck. And
Yeah.
worst case scenario, if it wasn't really well suited to your group or you didn't like it, at least you didn't sink a whole month into something before people just randomly started quitting.
No, exactly. And this brings us to the end of our difficulty section. Now, there wasn't a lot we could have dive into in this section without kind of spoiling some stuff. However, our star review for this one was 7.5 out of 10. Now, if you want to know more about why we gave it that rating, see the full review in the description below. Otherwise, we'll see you in balance.
Awesome. Welcome to the difficulty full-length review. So let's just dive into it. James, what do you think in terms of the difficulty of implementing this at a table?
Okay, so overall, like we said before, it's fairly straightforward. It is an easy thing to kind of put together and just have everyone playing around the table very quickly. However, the issues come up when you have things that we encountered. Now, before I dive into that too much, how did you feel things went just in general?
Okay, for sure. Well, I definitely think that there was some difficulty with bringing some of the intrigue to the table that is worthy of the rich lore that is established by Ashley. I mentioned it in the short review, but I'm going to expand upon it now. And what do I mean by this is that this is marketed as a mystery and an intrigue heavy one-shot. And to have the main antagonist, the bad guy, Acro, or Prospero as we initially know him, to be so overtly the big bad within 30 minutes, it just really kind of broke that intrigue and mystique for me really early on. And same with Kara. I just think that that there needs to be more morally gray between the two main heavy hitters of Kara and Acro. That way we're not really quite sure what we're getting involved into and who's on the right side of what. And I think you were going to pick up on that one with the character of Sewing Needle.
Yes. So Sewing Needle was one of my favorite little side characters, even though she was really only there to provide masks for the players to work with. Now, before I jump into the masks, I just was thinking about something while you were talking. Difficulty for implementing for a common DM, like just a DM who's used to this, not a problem. An experienced one, not a problem. New DMs might struggle with this just a smidgen, because unless they're comfortable with kind of following the railroad of a one-shot, which isn't a bad thing, it's gonna be a little difficult, right? Because a part of you as a new DM wants to go, yeah, I'm okay, ask me questions, let me feed the world through your questions. But this doesn't provide a lot of answers, so it could be difficult for the newer DMs. Now, back to the Sewing Needle and the masks. So the masks brought a really cool element to the party. They gave you buffs to your stats, to certain abilities and skill checks and such forth. And I think they were really well balanced, which is why I think that kind of boosted our score on this one a bit. Because it didn't overpower the characters, but it didn't not give them something.
Yeah,
right?
For sure.
It was worth it for where it is.
Yeah. And I would say in terms of difficulty of implementing that mechanic of the masks to the players was very easy for the players to understand.
Absolutely.
That, okay, these are magical masks, and then that led us down the path of further intrigue in terms of, well, what's with these things?
Exactly.
And then on the DM side of things, like Ashley made it extremely easy to implement because all the masks are accounted for. There's lots of different options.
I think there's 12 or 15 or so.
And they all have stat blocks for all of them.
Exactly. That was really well done. Now, moving past the masks, because the masks kind of tie into my next point. The wine. The wine is kind of...
Is this more of a balance conversation? I thought this was way more... This isn't difficulty to implement.
Okay, no, you're right.
Like...
I think you're right. The only point about the wine that would be for difficulty is the skill saves.
Oh, you're right. Good point.
So
That's a good point.
The saves and trying to wake up from the wine is the only critique, and that did kind of drop our points because that was that night that we stayed up real late doing this review.
Yeah.
We had the skill checks, and then the fact that it in the balance section that it was tied into, we're like, it dips into both.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know what? I'll leave the wine at that. It was just the skill checks. Could have used a little bit more polishing, I think, at most.
Yeah, and I believe, like, remembering our conversations as well, that in terms of difficulty to implement, could be difficult to implement. You have to have a pre-existing campaign for this to implement. Yes, you can run it as a total one-shot with just all level 3 characters.
Like we did.
Like, yeah, 100%. That's what we did. But, like you said, maybe for a new DM, that might be a little bit difficult in terms of how do I explain why we're doing this, other than the fact that we all know why we're doing this because we want to, but, like, in a way that thematically makes sense.
Exactly.
And, like you said, difficulty of maybe for... less experienced DMs, how to stay on the rails. And then the last part, just in terms of difficulty, is making sure that you've got the right group to run this with, right? Like, if you've got players that are geared towards more heavy RP and intrigue and mystery, then this is absolutely going to be up their alley. But if your group is more of the war gamers and the murder hobos, not only is it difficult to get them to want to, like, buy into this whole story and to really, just like a wine, like, let it percolate and just everybody enjoy the experience, they may rush through this and be done within half an hour, or everyone gets a TPK from just, like, causing that sort of mayhem.
Exactly.
Or on the flip side, what would I say? I mean, difficulty implementing it to that group. I don't know.
Yeah, and you know what? To pick up on your TPK thing for our last point here before we switch to the next section, is the end fight. Beautifully balanced. Ashley, I I praise thee for creating that scale. So what Ashley did is, I would love to be able to have it in my hands to show you, but she had an easy, medium, and a hard scale. So based on the size of your group and the level of your players, because we ran this with only 2 players and 1 DM.
Correct.
And it was done successfully. I think I fudged 3 rolls in total.
Yeah.
But the fight at the end was easy, medium, and hard, and it literally tells you when certain characters should come into the encounter, you know, which ones come into the encounter differently in the next stage, and just breaking down the fight by how much damage has been done to one of the characters and how certain things should be utilized for those characters, and it was just beautifully done.
So that makes the difficulty of implementing that part of the story and that like culmination of the tension easy for a DM.
Absolutely.
Right? No matter the skill level.
Absolutely. You know what? One point I don't think we've talked about. I don't know where Akro's bird came from.
Oh, okay.
Maybe that's just my memory, but I don't know where he was introduced in the story, but he was in the fight at the end, and I'm like, I don't remember this bird.
Gotcha. No, I wouldn't know either. Right? So, but yeah, no,
Yeah.
that for us is the difficulty section in full. Thanks for sticking around for it, and we're going to see you in the next section, which is balance.
See you there.
All right, hey friends and fiends, we're coming into the section on balance now. So what are we talking about balance? I'm talking about how well are the items, classes, races, and encounters balanced.
Okay.
So my first question for you, James, is the work balanced by means of the stats, the mechanics, the play, and the lore?
You know, taking a holistic view of the one-shot, it is very well balanced. And the fight at the end is... It still provides really good tension in combat. Obviously, the lore and the play and the mechanics, it all works really, really well within the fun of the one-shot.
Okay. Well, 100%. Wholeheartedly agree once again. I would like to just add that the masks themselves add so much to the game in terms of the immersion, the strategy, and a palpable incentive to complete the one-shot. And more on that later, folks. So, oh yeah, sorry.
No, yeah, yep. No, that's fine. Yeah, this section has to be really short, because we go any further beyond this and it's just spoilers territory
everywhere.
So we're gonna keep this section short for the short version. Our star rating for this one was 8.5 out of 10.
110%.
We have to try and remember these things.
If you want to know more about the balance and you're okay with having spoilers, again, in the description below.
We'll see you there.
Alright, so now on to the big topic of balance.
Oh.
We can talk freely, there's a lot to talk about here.
Exactly. So, mentioning that, nothing too horribly bad at all. Honestly, Ashley, you did a great job, and in short, before we dive into this, it's really well done.
110%.
It is really well balanced.
And I would just say that, you know, to pick off of where you left off with difficulty, that balance of the final fight, extremely balanced. You already explained that one fully.
Yep.
So, you know, you'd know that. I would just say in terms of the balance of, like, the lore, right? That might be one area that's a little bit maybe imbalanced, in the sense of there's such rich, incredible lore here that it might be a little bit difficult to try and squeeze it all in a way that does it justice within the course of a 2 to 4 hour one shot.
Exactly. So I know we talked about this in one of our long reviews previously, and I'm pretty sure I even said, yeah, we're going to touch on this in balance. But the lore for the Aurum and the Malum Animus really does open up an entire can of worms, and this is kind of where you have to take that arrow to the knee in this regard, because I get the drive to make a really compelling story and a really nice arc, but as a one shot, unfortunately, it takes the arrow, because you've now opened up this entire can of worms that, you know, as every DM and every party knows, you know, you have more than 3 people that are in constant agreement, someone's going to want to do something slightly different, someone's going to want to move around. Let's say one of your players really falls in love with this lore and they run away with it, right? They want to go like you had mentioned, go see that angel city and all that stuff. And I know this kind of diverges from balance, but because the lore is so grandiose, it can lend a little bit of overpowered nature to the one shot, and it could cause a little bit of havoc for DMs later on if they're like, well, can we go back to Abrito? Can we go back to this angel city?
Yeah, I never thought about that, but it really does put a DM in the hot seat a little bit and put him against the corner.
Yeah.
Because it is so good and intriguing, it might actually detract from whatever their current campaign is.
Exactly.
And especially if it's homebrew, that might actually really upset a DM in a sense.
Yeah.
But again, this is something that's so subjective, and like
it is.
That scenario might not happen at all, and
Exactly.
people could just easily move on to the next.
Absolutely. And like I said, that was just kind of one of the points that I was like, okay, this is what I've seen in my campaigns as a player or as a DM. You know, things do tend to run away sometimes, but so long as you're all able to communicate, it's not a problem. Overall, that's my biggest nitpick with the balance side of things. It's really good, though.
No, 110%. That's why it still was a very strong 8.5 out of 10 for us. Like I said, these are just very minor things, but they can, if there's room for things to potentially go wrong, we do have to talk about that. And the thing is, you know, we talked about this in one of our prior reviews too, but, you know, the fact of showing up to where you get off, and the characters having to go and you know buy a script. You tell me this after the fact, because what we did was completely opposite. Was we were supposed to go up to the monument and then have this exchange with Kara. That never happened because my girlfriend and I were so enamored with his descriptions of the city. We're like, let's go take a look around, and he was kind enough to indulge us in that, because there wasn't something hard-nosed that he could do to like bring us back, but he still found an amazing way to do it.
Oh, shucks.
And that maybe, again, we talked about this already, but a little bit more morally gray characters, and we did come up with a 5-minute interaction that would have fixed all this if Acro and Kara were arguing in front of the monument when you guys roll up. That instantaneously bringing this all together in the mix. And that is the last thing that I'm going to say in regards to balance, is it's far more RP heavy in the beginning, and then with combat at the end. Again, knowing your audience, knowing your group, and knowing that that is the balance of this one shot, so that you can figure out whether or not you think that this would work for your group and for you as a DM or not.
Exactly. Now, my very last point, because I know we've touched upon it recently, and I just let my mouth run on me in the beginning of this, the wine. So, the wine. What happens, James, you ask me, I hear? Well...
Unbalanced. I'm sorry, Ashley.
There is wine served at the party. Anyone who drinks the wine has to make a saving throw. If they
at a certain period of time.
Exactly. And if they don't make the saving throw, unconscious 8 hours. And by the looks of it, I did not see any way to wake the players up.
Yes. So, I mean, again, like a lot of our notes, is an experienced DM could easily kind of fix this if the entire party fell flat. Because if they were playing the drinking game, all of them together, that's a TPK in a sense.
Exactly.
Unless somebody else comes around and wakes them up, perchance. But there's no notes on doing that.
Plus, they're wearing the masks, and for those of you that are either looking through this as we're talking about it or have this, you know that the masks at a certain time will convert those people into what mask they're wearing. So now your player of your groups of 6 people or whatever, you know, you're all now foxes, bunny rabbits, and bears lying in a room because y'all passed out. And there's no cure for what you have because it's a magical it's a magical device that you can't take off now. Not that I saw. And the wine, that's the whole party.
And on top of that, I remember us discussing way back when we were playing this about the balance too, that is later down in like the Undercroft where Prospero is at, is that, I mean, you came up, like there was nothing written about what was on that desk, but you came up with having cures for like cure disease potions on there, and thank goodness, because both my girlfriend and I were afflicted with lycanthropy via a were-rat, right?
Exactly.
And there's obviously no saves for that, which I mean could be great in any campaign, as long, again, if everyone has the checklist checked off in terms of that's okay, let that happen to my characters, whatever, perfect. But just out of the gates, kind of, especially if you're like running this on the fly and you get to that and you're like, holy, this is gonna have like campaign lasting effects on my, and especially if you're running it as part of a campaign,
Yeah.
that's a pretty serious.
My Warforged Barbarian is now every month gonna turn into a rat.
Right? So could have some real issues at the table that you'll have to address later, right?
Exactly. And I mean, those are some of the things that, you know, when we talked about them, and yes, it did help. It did affect lowering the score for this section. However, we did look at it. And we do understand that some of it is speculative. It's not always going to happen. So that's why it's not.
No, these are really nitpicks, right? And yeah, like.
But I mean, that, like we said, and this is our wrap-up statement before we go on to our final section of intrigue. You know, it's our job. We need to pick these things apart, and because as creators as well, we want to have that feedback, even if especially when it's this nitpicky stuff, because that means people have looked into our stuff.
110%, and that's just really what we want to reflect to all of you guys watching there, as well as to you, Ashley. But at the end of the day, overall, the balance in terms of the encounters, the play, the stats, and the mechanics is extremely solid. It's just really where the lore section is where things kind of got a little bit of detraction, if you will.
Exactly. So I think that wraps up our long review. I'm sure we could continue ranting, but we won't. We will see you in Intrigue. Hello, friends and fiends. Welcome to Intrigue. So, Intrigue, does this catch the eye? How does this spark interest in players and DMs? So, the first question is, how is the artwork?
Holy, James, that's honestly a loaded question. I don't know, do you want to ask me a little more?
Well, yeah. Well, how is the layout of the artwork within the documents themselves?
Okay, all right. So I would say that the placement, it isn't too distracting. The layout meshes really well with the artwork. And just shout out to all the artists that worked on it. Seriously, it looks like one artist did all of it.
Like you say, 100%, I agree. The art layout in the book made for not only an appealing and aesthetically pleasing experience, it brought together the beautifully described setting around you. And yes, like you said, a great job to the artists.
Perfect. So my question to you is, how does it sound and read?
It reads like a bunch of consonants and vowels. No, really. My only gripe is that it might be a little restrictive dialogue-wise for NPCs, but honestly, everything worked well for me.
Agreed. For me, I found that the material read really well. There's lots of layers of story and lore, and like I already mentioned, the inclusion of Italian in there made for an eloquent adventure that was easy to understand. It was easy to comprehend and just digest, and even on the fly, like for you and for me, with hardly any time. And there was barely any grammar issues in the document itself, which is always nice.
Shout out to the editors there. So, what about the draw for the DMs? And you know what? I just asked myself this question, so I'm going to steal it. For both you and I, we really enjoyed this one shot from a DM and a player perspective. But in our full-length review, we're going to dive into this a little bit more because there needs to be more said in this section than what we have already.
110%. There's so many reasons to pick this up.
Absolutely.
Like, honestly, like, do it, please.
100%.
We can't really, like, spoil too much. So we're going to just leave that for the full-length review, again, down in the description below. Other than that, that brings us to our wizardly rating for Intrigue, and that was a solid 9 out of 10. Great job, our team and editors.
Amazing. And you know, again, just a big shout out to Ashley Warren and her team of people, the editors, the artists, and everyone that put this together. It was a great job all around. And you know, if you guys are looking for something just to kill this quarantine time.
Yes.
Like, this is worth it. 100%. I mean, I would play it again and again because, like things with D&D, it's always going to be different every time you play it. So, take this 9 out of 10. Go to the DM's Guild, links below, and go pick it up.
Okay. So everybody, that brings us to our final wizardly rating of an 8.75 out of 10. We absolutely recommend that you go and pick this up.
Absolutely. 100%.
So the only last kind of closing questions or remarks that I'm going to make is this work indicative of the creator's reputation or things that they're known for? Absolutely. This falls in line with other work that Ashley has done in the past. She's mainly focused on campaign setting and just campaign big story, like epic story, and one-shots as well. She's one of the founders of the RPG Workshop, which is huge for the community of creators because it shows you and gives you guidelines. There's paid courses as well as free ones in terms of how to create for D&D. And as well as just how to run your first campaign as well too. And there's a job board which helps creators such as ourselves find great collaborations to and great people to work with, as well as just work in the field in general.
Exactly.
So links to that in the description below. And just the other question that we had is, James, would we as the Wizardly Warehouse recommend this to other people?
100%. Absolutely. Definitely. Just, this work was beautifully done. The visuals, the style, the writing, the characters, the setting, it's perfect. I really love it. 8.75 out of 10. That is awesome.
Yes, like, don't let that try and skew anything in your mind. That really means that it's pretty much perfect. And
Absolutely.
The way that our objective criteria is established, we explained it at the beginning, right, is there are a few little critiques and nitpicks here and there, but this is something that we truly believe in and that we believe that you guys need to go out and pick up yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay, it's already gotten a very high reward in terms of its medal award, and it's still free to pick up. So I would recommend you can go ahead and download it for free. Link in the description below for the DMs Guild where to pick it up. But especially in these trying times, really recommend going back and supporting Ashley's work, and by doing that, the community as a whole. You can even donate 10 cents if you needed to, because James, tell us why this is important.
Well, you know what? It's important because we're a community. Right now, in these trying times of the quarantine and the world the way it is right now, we need this content. This is what brings us together, whether it's through Skype and obeying the quarantine, or, very carefully, setting something up to have that connection, that community. That's who we are.
110%.
That's all of us together. We're in this together. Let's go support those content creators. That's what we're here to do as well, is to bring this content that you might not find before and bring it to different platforms and show you all. Because this is the stuff that makes memories. And A Night of Masks and Monsters was by far one of my favorite one-shots I've played. Please go out, support Ashley. And, we would say this about anyone's content, almost, really. Like,
Yes.
Support them. If you like it, support them.
And that's the whole reasoning behind why we offer a short form review and a full in-depth review, is for people that want to just get the skinny on it and on those 4 major criteria, which tend to be the pillars that people make the decisions off of.
Yeah.
And you don't want any spoilers, then we keep it short, we keep it simple, we give you some points that we liked, some points that we were a little leery on, and we give you a rating, and based off of that, you go and make your own decisions. At the end of the day, it's completely up to you.
Yeah.
And then the full-length review is for us just nerding out and going full in depth and just showing, I guess, everybody that we're really nerdy and we talk about everything after we've done it. But anyways, brings us to our closing remarks, which is if you enjoyed this review and you'd like to see more of this content, James and I are going to be producing much more now with the quarantine in effect, and with our setup being in a much better place than it ever has been. So links below for our Patreon. Obviously you're here on YouTube watching this. We also have Twitter, Instagram, and we are going to have a Facebook page published soon. It is finished, we're just in the final stages. So be sure to just click that bell icon and stay in order to stay up to date with all of our recent things that we have coming at you.
Yeah. Give us a like, share us around, and we...
Oh, wait, hold on. Sorry. And if you would like us to cover any of your material, please feel free to reach out to us on any of those platforms, and we'll be sure to get back to you, and we'd love to review your content for you.
Absolutely. And we will see
you
through the rift.